when I had submitted a couple of things for us maybe to talk about here this morning, and just for a reference sake, the date for today's podcast is the 26th of February. Talked about the budget, assessments, and such, and we'll get into that in just a bit. But what has happened since then is the tragedy in Parkland at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, where we lost several kids and adults there. Obviously, our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to those individuals as they continue to process that, and I believe are actually heading back to school today in the aftermath of that. But obviously, Tony, this is a good reminder for us of things that we need to be thinking about with regards to keeping schools safe, as well as in this instance, making sure that we're giving kids an opportunity to express themselves appropriately and make sure that they're sharing their feelings about things. So a little bit to unpack there, but thought I'd just let you share any just overarching thoughts that you have about the situation.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and the organizing that students and families have done, though, is for me where there's hope and the opportunity to learn and grow and take some, I think, new steps, a different direction to really end these terrible situations of violence. I think the opportunity we've got is to really stay focused on what schools in our communities are. They're places of belonging, connection, a chance to grow and learn together. And so even as we have these hard conversations, I think we have to remember, first, foremost, and always, places of belonging and places of connection that our schools need to be. And so when I hear people talk about all the other ways of making hard targets and everything else, I think our job as educators is to stay focused on, hey, we need to make sure we have the resources to give our children and families and educators what they need to fully meet the needs of all of our kids. And even in those situations where we, discipline, whatever, it's always, in a way that builds a young person's humanity and deepens their connection, right? And so if we're feeling like we're losing some of our kids, we got to reach out even harder. And I think the opportunity we've got is to think even more deeply about what schools need to be, the way we build relationships, and of course, keeping our kids safe and being present in our buildings. We need more adults in our buildings. We need, as administrators, walk it, feel it, like make sure the place is the way it needs to be. And, the other piece, honestly, is about community outreach. And, the more you see something, you got to say something, and everybody is a part of that. And I just think it's obviously weighs on all of us, and but I do think this moment of young people stepping up and sharing their thinking and their voices and across the country. So we'll, as a state agency, be putting guidance out starting March 1st about the national walkout and different ways to support and work with young people and families in each of our communities. I think we really need to get in deeper dialogue with our kids, and this is a moment of strong leadership for them, and we need to join with them and learn what's on their minds.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I would say, just to accentuate a couple of points there, Tony, with regards to the walkouts, our national affiliate, the National Association of Secondary School Principals, has already put out some information from their perspective, and also with regards to this podcast, we'll be sure to highlight and link to any of the information that you guys are sharing out at the state board, just so people are fully informed. But for our school leaders out there and dealing with these types of conversations and working with kids in these emotional moments, I think it's really important for them to make sure that they're not overreacting, and that they're really working with students, right? I think if kids are treated respectfully and worked with in a reasonable way, I think there's opportunities to make sure that their voices can be heard and they kids can feel the freedom to speak, but do it within the parameters of a safe educational environment, right? I believe that's what education's about, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the ability to what one great principal that I worked with used to say is that got to be a lighthouse. That we're what keeps them. They're going all over the place. They're figuring out who they are. This is a middle school principal. They're kind of bouncing around. So we got to be the lighthouse. We don't bounce around with them. We keep the light shining where we're headed. And I think this ability to listen, to be in relationship, but keep kids safe is really important. I totally agree with you.
And I got to tell you, it's pretty important to be listening to middle school principals, because with 2 middle school children in my own household right now, those kids are full of emotions all the time. So
right, exactly.
Just working with them is a special talent and skill. I did want to, and this will accentuate a couple of things that you said just a moment ago, Tony, with regards to keeping schools safe. I was sharing with you before we started recording here that I had a phone call last week with Dr. David Turner, who's one of my predecessors here at IPA, and he worked with a lot of school leaders in his position here as executive director after the Columbine incident, back in 1999, I believe, and did a lot of training and worked with law enforcement officials and others with that. And he talked about 3 overarching things that they talked with school leaders about when it came to keeping their schools safe. And I just thought, since we're on the call, and I believe people will be listening in, wanted to be sharing these. And one was making sure, you talked about building strong relationships with kids, doing things to make sure we're not disenfranchising them, walking the buildings, number 2 here, just to be mindful of our doors closing appropriately. Are they locking the way that they need to be? Are windows shutting up as necessary? And just making sure that the physical plant is in good repair. And then the third one is to be reminding teachers to instruct kids, and teachers to be doing this as well, but don't leave things hidden. If there's concerns of things that they're seeing or hearing, we've got to make sure that school leaders and the appropriate officials are aware of that stuff. Just, you think about the complexity of this all, Tony. I mean, there's just a lot of moving parts and pieces, but we've got to make sure people are engaged and are being intentional with this stuff, wouldn't you think?
I absolutely agree. And the piece about, if you see something, say something, I think is more important than ever.
Yeah.
And, we really have to encourage everybody to speak up. And I do think this connects in some ways to this question of the bullying and even if you feel like some kids, you're watching it happen, you got to say something about the bullying too,
right? Because
some of what's happened, right, is some of these kids feel like they don't have any other response. And I think we've got to be talking about, hey, everybody's got a role here to keep our schools places of inclusion and belonging, and nobody should be pushed out. So,
right. Absolutely.
Totally support what you said.